If you're not familiar with cross-domain tracking, it's the ability for you to track the same user as they move between sites that you own, between, say, your main website and your careers website, or if you were saying events or store appointments. So all kinds of things you'd use, you'd find a lot on a healthcare website. So I wanted to focus a little bit on healthcare websites here because I think healthcare websites, more than a lot of other sites, almost always have cross-domain tracking issues that you need to address. So just in this video, I'm just going to go over a couple of core things that we find are a common issue. One is just the cookie domains, making sure that's set to auto, and I'll talk a bit about that. If you get some more complex issues, you can use hashes for to avoid redirects, and then parameter removal. I've run across that a lot in like search result pages. Another thing is just reaching out to providers to adding Google Tag Manager. Google Tag Manager is going to make your job so much easier in this situation. And then the last thing, which is one of the most important things, is updating your referral exclusion list. So I'm just looking at here at this Jackson Health System website, one of the bigger healthcare networks across the country. And you just have this little tag inspector here, and we see that they have Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, and a couple other things Google related on their website, which is great. And like most healthcare websites, they have a lot of different subdomains and other places you can go. So for instance, here we have careers. I already clicked on here, so it just takes you to jobs. And when you click on that, it's a different domain. It's a subdomain, but it is technically a different domain. And it's jobs.jacksonvillehealth.org. And at the end, you'll see this question mark underscore GA equals 21990 and so forth. Just a long string of numbers, which really comes from your cookie that you have on your website. So as the user goes to a website, Google Analytics will establish a cookie for that person, and then as they go from page to page, that cookie kind of strings that all together and says, hey, this is the same person. So this allows the Google to see that the person on the main Jackson Health System website and then this jobs website, that's the same person, this is the same path. So if you came from a Google ad or Facebook, it follows that all the way through to the end. So the basic setup is relatively simple, and that's where you just go in and you're actually doing your Google Analytics. If you're using a Google Analytics settings variable in Google Tag Manager, that's great. So you put in your tracking ID, and then the main thing you want to do is this cookie domain auto. And this just makes sure at the highest level that all your domains are getting picked up of this cookie domain of that high level cookie, and it passes throughout the whole domain. And that's great because then no matter what, if you have www or careers or jobs or shop or whatever, that's going to get picked up everywhere your Google Analytics is set up. Now, as you know, that's kind of like a very common problem, but another issue is that you'll end up have third-party software like Enquicker to help with like scheduling, say. So you have, you person on your site, but then the actual scheduled appointment with a healthcare provider, they have to go off-site to something like Enquicker. So here an example from SSM Health here in St. Louis, Missouri, and they have a listing of different hospital locations. And then here we can see they actually hold your place online for this ER. But when we click over here, it takes you to stlouis.ssm.enquicker.com. So this is not just a subdomain. This is a whole different website, a whole different domain. So that cookie can't really be passed there through that normal means. So we still have to have this, we have to have cross-domain tracking, which we'll see it in here in the URL somewhere in here. We keep going. There it is, NGA 2.21414. So that's their ID from Google Analytics. So if you go back to the Google Tag Manager container here, we can actually see that what we need to do is create these auto-linked domains. So as you go from one site to the other, you will just tell it, hey, these are the particular domains that if you see that, a link to that domain in the HTML as a link, make sure to append that GAID. And remember that GAID is unique to every single person. So my GAID and your GAID are going to be very different. So don't actually copy that whole GAID because now it's going to think that it's you for every single link out there. And I've definitely seen that. So I did want to say that there are a couple other options here. There's usually the hash as a delimiter and then decorating forms. So using hash as a delimiter, I've seen is very useful in a couple edge cases. specifically if you're, say, you decorate the link, you go to this other page, and you see that it redirects and it strips out all your parameters because it's redirecting maybe a search result and it's trying to change URL on the fly. So what you can do is instead of using in that question mark and then as a parameter, it can create it as a hash, and you just check that as true, and then it will create that little pound sign that you see like in Twitter, and it will pin that at the end. And so when the new page sets up, it won't strip off the hash. In fact, the hash won't affect the page at all. So it's a really nice way to get around those weird situations where the URL is stripping out your cross-domain tracking, because I see that a lot. And the other one is this decorating forms. This doesn't work particularly well, but it is something to keep in mind that if it's a form and the link isn't directly in that HTML, you can decorate the form. That doesn't always work. So if in that case, you might actually have to work with a developer who actually built the site. And this little page here on this linker is so just a function that they would have to call in their actual code. And you see this tracker name, linker auto. So it actually go into the code that builds that form. So we want to avoid that whenever possible. The more straightforward your form is to actually send people along to that page is going to be better off. But we always know that sites are built in different ways, so it's something you just got to keep in mind. So getting back to this SSM, you can see it's on Quickr. Now, generally what happens with a site like in Quickr is you can probably have Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager, and here we have, let's see here, they have Google Analytics, but they haven't put Google Tag Manager on here. We can put that tracking on there, but generally what happens is by the time you get to, say, the actual form where we're filling out very personal, private information, especially about their type of healthcare, they're going to not allow you to track that. And that's fine as long as you pick it up at the beginning and then you pick it up at the end. And the way you're able to do that is make sure that on the thank you page you have your Google Analytics, and then you have this little go back to your Google Analytics, and I'll reach out to here last, is this referral exclusion list. So in your Google Analytics admin, you're just going to go to your tracking info under your property and go to referral exclusion list. And this just says, hey, if traffic is coming from this particular website, don't treat it as a new source. Don't say, in our case, creativeanvil.com or events or careers job score is a new a session. This is still the continuation of the previous session that the person was already on. And so then you can see that original source of, say, Facebook, as you go from site to site within our network, it still says Facebook was that original source. And it doesn't say, hey, you had 4 sessions because you went to these 4 different pages. No, you just had 1 session all coming from Facebook. So that referral exclusion is also really cool because it can be a bit greedy. So you could say just creativeanvil.com, and that would catch every single subdomain, which is great, so you don't have to write in all the subdomains, or if you add a new subdomain, say you had one for COVID and you forgot to add it as a referral exclusion, it wouldn't matter if you have it just the top level domain. But in this case, we have this careers.jobscore.com, which is much more specific, so if there's something else .jobscore.com or just jobscore.com, it wouldn't pick it up. So it's another cool thing you can do. So then the last thing, going back to Google Tag Manager, is of course adding these actual links in here in this auto link domain. And so once you have the cookie domain set to auto, you have these cross-domain settings of auto link domains on, and then you have your referral exclusion, you're really good to go in terms of the tracking. And of course you can QA that anytime. You can actually watch it. Now in real time, the Google Analytics, it sometimes takes a while to catch up and restring that stuff together, so you might have to check, say, a few hours later. But you can always watch it in Google Tag Manager as the person goes from site to site and making sure that ID is in there. And then you can also go in to the specific, say, the code and actually go and inspect that and just look at your actual cookies. So you go to Application, Cookies, and then say this in Quickr site. I'll just pull this over here. You can see this GA and making sure that's the correct GA ID, that it overwrote the previous one that it created. So really that's it in a nutshell. And as I said, all these providers like in Quickr, I know for a fact will put your Google Tag Manager on there. Just, they'll do it in a limited space. But if you ask them enough, they'll help you out. I know Clockwork and some of these other ones, they provide these third-party services. They're usually pretty willing to work with you as long as you're very clear on what you're doing and very open with them and how you're setting up the tracking. So feel free to subscribe to this because I love talking about this kind of stuff. I think we're going to put lots of things, and my whole team loves talking about this. So I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel. Thank you very much.